Hi, everyone. My name is Rabbi Sam Schapera, and I'm the program director at Northern Hills Synagogue. And thank you for joining us in our next installment of our interview series while we're in isolation. And my guest for this week is Sandy Spitz. And Sandy is here to talk about her experience volunteering with the Cincinnati Zoo. Sandy, can you tell us a little bit about what you did volunteering for the zoo?
We moved here in 1985. We had been zoo members wherever we had lived, and so that was one of my priorities. Our children were 4, 7, and 10. And we had always wanted them to experience zoo opportunities. We used to live, before moving to Cincinnati, we lived in Washington State, Eastern Washington State, but we would actually travel on weekends to Seattle, which was about 3.5 hours away. We belonged to the zoo in Seattle as well. So not only being a member, I felt when I had some time I wanted to be a volunteer. And I did a variety of things. I was an ambassador, but I always had a love for gorillas in particular. Therefore, I volunteered in the ape area. I wasn't in the education department, but I did a variety of handouts and meeting people and talking about apes. And then I wanted to do more. And then there was an opportunity to be a volunteer to give talks. And I wasn't happy with the ape talk that they were giving because it needed to be updated. And I decided from my teaching and the research I'd like to do that I would start to make a PowerPoint, my own original PowerPoint on gorillas. I'd not done PowerPoints before, but I was determined to learn and to do. That's my story about the zoo. And so forth. I continued it.
And that's what you did at the Cincinnati Zoo, is you worked creating these PowerPoints and teaching them. You said that you taught them to not just people at the zoo, but at organizations around the city.
Can I tell you about what motivated me to be so in love with gorillas?
Yes, please.
You laugh, but it's better to be in love with gorillas. Sometimes they can be your best friends. When I was in college, I had a combination major, sociology and education. One of my courses was physical anthropology. I had a professor who would come in. She would trudge in the middle of winter when there was snow on the ground, and she would wear winter boots, no stockings, and kind of very heavy set and short. So when she'd come into the room, people started laughing at her. But she could do every ape call you could imagine. And she proceeded, and everybody was sitting there with their mouths open, shocked at how amazing she was. So that was kind of my memorable experience about gorillas. I'd always loved them, but hearing this, so I just always really cared about them. And, she would tell us various different characteristics to look at if we were at a zoo. So she just continued my interest in them. Very special.
Yes.
I even remember her name, and what is it? 50 some odd years ago, and that's how much of an impression she made.
Wow. What a beautiful thing to be able to impact a student so deeply. So speaking of that, I think we'll get back to gorillas in a minute, but one of the things that you mentioned when we were talking is that you always see yourself as a lifelong learner. So you spent lots of time learning in college and then beyond, but that doesn't stop. And I'm wondering what that means to you. What does it mean to be a lifelong learner, and how can we be a lifelong learner too?
Part of it really stems back to the fact that you're a teacher. And when you're a teacher, you're not only teaching, but you keep learning as well. For me, when a subject would come up, it wasn't enough. I'd have to learn more about the subject. I also taught gifted classes. And what I would do in the days where you actually had books that you could hold on to, I'd take an encyclopedia or a world atlas. And I would just have the child close their eyes, and we would thumb through the pages, and I'd say point. And wherever they stopped, it was something to learn about, some place to learn about. And we would go off from there. It was a mountain range or someplace in the ocean, or they pointed to Israel as an example. They would have to then look at it and research it. So we now move on to something else, which is, to me, hilarious. Yesterday, I was with my 4-year-old grandson, and you know these little ones, they have total control of the computer. He was on Google World, and he was showing me how the earth was spinning and pointing, bringing things close and bringing things back. And then it wasn't doing anything. He said, "Grandma, it's thinking." And I'm watching him, and he goes to search, and he just plays with the keyboard, and he puts in an E and an R and an H, and all of a sudden pops up the name of someplace in Romania that actually started with an E and an R and an H or something, totally random. So, I was thinking about that. So I said, okay. And then it had pictures of this city. And, you can go to Google and go to images. And, from there, it's just a technological way of what we used to have with encyclopedias. But I got such a kick out of that. So that's what it is. It's the passion of seeing something and running with it. And that's how you continuously learn, and asking questions, which of course Henry says, another question.
What an amazing thing to share with your grandson, is being able to do that.
And he's teaching me.
It sounds like when you go to a Wikipedia page and you press on a link, and then you press on another link, and you end up somewhere completely new and exciting, right. Hopefully.
Right. So you just have to have that passion for learning. Mm-hmm. And that's it. So, I'm always looking deeper. I don't look at surface. Mm-hmm. I want to know more. That's it. That's what a lifelong learner does.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Thank you for kind of giving us a way to continue our learning, even when we're kind of stuck at home and not able to go out and be with a teacher. But, the thing that we have access to the most is technology. Right. I want to ask you a question that I didn't put on the list of questions that I sent you. But your teacher from college was able to do all of the APE calls. Can you do any APE calls? No.
No, I just watch them and marvel at them. That's all. You always wonder, you're looking at them and they're staring at you, and you're saying, what are they thinking? Yeah.
So what is the most interesting fact about gorillas that you found during your research for your PowerPoint?
That each one is an individual, and you can tell. You could actually, if you were doing research and you had the names of them, you could tell when one would appear, because each one has an individual nose print unique to them. And I think that is amazing.
That's very cool.
Yeah. And, you can go on, and a lot of this is on the slides. One gorilla could have the strength of 8 men.
Jeez.
They live 35 to 40 years longer in captivity. And for anybody that has visited the zoo we had a matriarch by the name of Samantha, who just recently passed away. And she was about 45 years old.
Wow. Her name was Samantha?
Her name was Samantha.
Oh, nice name.
Yeah, so she was the mother and the grandmother of so many other gorillas, and she was able to teach them all these nurturing skills. and make them better mothers.
Wow.
Now, there's so many facts and very amazing ones where there was another baby gorilla by the name of Gladys that was born at the Gladys something zoo in Texas, and it was rejected by its mother. As a result of Samantha being at the zoo and, you know, all her babies, they thought that the Cincinnati Zoo would be a good place to transfer her and where she'd have the care of gorilla families. As it turns out, Gladys was like the great-great-grandchild of Samantha. Another thing that's important is that all gorillas that are in zoos in the United States have been born in captivity. None of them have been taken from the wild.
That is actually very comforting to hear.
And one last thing, there were two different kinds. There's the ones we have at the zoos. The zoos are Western lowland gorillas, as compared to, I think one of them, I don't know if that was in my slide, mountain gorillas. The lowland ones come from the west of Africa. The mountain gorillas come from the east, and the eastern mountain are very, very full of hair because they're usually found up north, you know, high in the mountains where it's cold. And the western, which is the one that most people are familiar with, are found at zoos. So I could go on and on and on and on and on.
Well, speaking of going on and on, because these are all so fascinating, and if anyone is interested, I mean, I'm certainly interested, but if anyone is interested in Sandy doing kind of a virtual presentation of the gorilla presentation, of the gorilla PowerPoint, too, and we can work on getting something set up maybe, so that we can hear so much more about these gorillas. Sandy, you also said you've got some PowerPoints and have done a lot of research on tortoises also, is that right?
Yeah, I've done the research, but I don't have a PowerPoint on it.
PowerPoint.
But I do have a PowerPoint on hippos.
Hippos, that was
which
it.
Which I wrote. And one of the other PowerPoints that people might be interested in is history of the zoo.
History of the Cincinnati Zoo, specifically.
History of the Cincinnati Zoo, yeah. And it goes on. I have other animals. I have the botanical garden. It goes on, and each one is fun. But what I will say is that I have given presentations. I gave them at Ollie. I gave them at some nursing homes.
This, I think, gives us another opportunity to be lifelong learners, creating programs like this. So before we go, I just wanted to know, since we've been in isolation and we really have been separated from our larger community, what do you have to say? Do you have, what would you like to share with your Northern Hills family?
Okay. I heard this quite a while ago, and I don't remember the source, but it said, you know, when you're retired, when you have a lot of time on your hands, how do you get from day to day? And one of the things I learned was make a plan the night before for the next day. At least one thing that you're going to get up and do, whether it be just to get out of the house, go for a walk, and then the rest of the day, just follow suit. But you just have to have one thing to do. You know, like everybody else, we went through all kinds of photos and all kinds of nostalgia. And I know from all my friends that everybody I've been talking to, they've been doing that. So learn, of course. You can do anything to learn, do something, and connect with people. And count your blessings. We all have blessings. I was brought up in a household of a real optimist. My mother was such an optimist, and sometimes, you know, we used to think that she would just do things, trying to think of the word, can't think what it is. Anyway, she was an eternal optimist. I consider myself a realistic optimist. And one of the other things is, you know, some of our blessings are just all of our friends that we have developed as members of Northern Hills. So those blessings. So that's it. Counting your blessings and just continuing to learn and keep optimistic, even in this time that we're in where it can be very depressing. That's it.
Yeah, Yes, there's always a silver lining, even when it seems very, very small.
Right. The last thing is, if any of you are Monty Python, if whatever people, Eric Idle wrote, always look on the bright side of life. So, yeah, we look at the glass as half full, not empty, and things will get better. Stay safe.
Yes. Well, thank you, Sandy.
My pleasure.
Well, Sandy, thank you so much for joining us and teaching us about gorillas and teaching us about your passion volunteering and researching for zoos really across the nation, not just here in Cincinnati. And I really hope that we get a chance to learn more from you with your own PowerPoint, your own research that you've done. So thank you so much. And like I said, please reach out if you have any questions regarding this interview series or gorillas. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Samantha.